Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Course of World History. I'm Mr. Samuelson, and today we are looking at Indian Ocean trade, or the Indian Ocean Trade Network of the Middle Ages. Our essential question here will be, how did this Indian Ocean Trade Network impact Africans, Arabs, Asians, and Europeans? Yes, it's going to have a wide range of impact. So let's get started. The trade networks of the Indian Ocean are occasionally included in discussion of the Silk Road trade because it is this connection between China and the Far East all the way over to the Mediterranean Sea in the far west. But sometimes it deserves its separate conversation all of its own. Gets started a lot later than the land routes. Around 800 CE is when it gets started. And it does much better in terms of consistency. It is pretty much a flourishing trade route for most of its existence, occasionally interrupted by war, but goes through about 700 years of pretty consistent flourishing trade until the Portuguese come in and kind of wreck it all in the 1500s. All right, so how does this get started? The Indian Ocean Trade Network gets started when Arabs and Indians, in particular, start to become aware of the mineral wealth of East Africa, that East Africa has a lot of good stuff that they're really interested in having. And these East African city-states, most notably Kilwa, Zanzibar, Mombasa, Sofala, and a number of others, really start to grow and flourish because they are coastal cities with access to this kind of trade. And these city-states, although they're not independently wealthy with materials, they do have access to these inland trade areas where a lot of raw materials exist and then get shipped to the coast where they're then traded with other peoples. In particular, this region of Africa specialized in the trade of gold, a lot of gold in this region, iron, and ivory. So these coastal cities grow really wealthy because these are highly sought after goods in Asia. Asia does not produce nearly as much gold. So gold really becomes the big one for East Africa. Great Zimbabwe, an empire which you may have heard of before, it's this inland empire, really benefits from this trade because these coastal cities are going to be trading with Zimbabwe to get these goods that then they trade to the Arabs and Indians and Chinese. So as kind of the far end of the Indian Ocean trade network, being inland from it, Great Zimbabwe is going to benefit from it as well. Another thing that traders really liked about this region is it was relatively peaceful. Middle East, South Asia is going through a lot of intermittent warfare, a lot of breakdown of the Silk Road, because when two major powers along the Silk Road are fighting, it's not good for trade. But in ocean-going trade, it's a little bit easier to work your way around a conflict. And also, there just were fewer conflicts during this time period in East Africa. So merchants were really drawn to this as a safer way to make money. Now, this trade network and this connection of different peoples has the effect of creating the Swahili. So centuries of robust trade in East Africa mean Indian and Arabic merchants are going to want to have regular access to it. So they establish homes and kind of warehouses and merchant centers in East Africa itself. And more migrants come to live in parts of these communities, which lead to kind of a mixing of the population. And over the time, we wind up having a very mixed ethnic group in the region, which today we call Swahili. Swahili is kind of an ethnic group and a language that is dominant in this area of East Africa, which aligns with the East African trade city-states. And it is a mix of Bantu, African Bantu language, Arabic, and Hindi, the language of India. So the Indians, Arabs, and Chinese are really interested in these items that are sold in East Africa. And in exchange for the gold and the ivory and the iron, they're going to be exchanging spices and porcelain and silk and cotton and all the goods that they're producing in their country. And so this trade between those two regions will flourish. But in order to better profit from this trade, you want to have a really good way of moving goods to and fro, to and from, there and back. Yeah. Now, the Arabs in particular, being in the middle of this trade route, really take kind of the lead in exchanging these goods. And they develop something called the lateen sail, this sail right here, rather than a square one. And what a triangular square sail will let you do this kind of zigzag pattern into the wind as you're sailing. So you can go against the wind. You don't always have to sail with the wind. And with the lateen sail, the Arabs were able to better access the east coast of Africa. They also used Chinese compasses, borrowed the compass from China, and were then able to better sail in the open sea and know which direction they were supposed to go. Now, these better Arab ships are going to eventually, from this Indian Ocean trade route, work their way through to the Mediterranean Sea. The Arab shipbuilding technology, lateen sails, compass, and so on and so forth, start to be seen in the Mediterranean. And Europeans are then able to be exposed to these Arab innovations and make better ships for themselves. And that's going to be very important for the Europeans, because once the Ottoman Empire, this big empire right here, shuts down European access to the Silk Road, which they'll do after the capture of Constantinople in 1453. They take that city and no longer allow Europeans to trade on the Silk Road because they kind of want to go conquer Europe. This is going to be a problem for Europeans. In particular, the Portuguese way over here, who still want these goods, but now are really far away from being able to access them. So what the Portuguese decide to do is find another way to reach those goods. They decide that they're going to sail around Africa. And in the late 1400s, the Portuguese become the first Europeans to pop their heads into the Indian Ocean trade network. Now, in preparation for these long voyages to get into the Indian Ocean, a Portuguese leader, Prince Henry the Navigator, puts together a group of leading sailors and scholars and tries to build a better ship. They want to build the most advanced ship in the world, something that can handle a journey like this, can hold up to weather, can handle conflict. And they develop a ship called the Caravel, using that lateen sail and using some other innovations that the Europeans had borrowed from other people and a few of their own. The dominance of this ship was really first established in the Battle of Diu. This was a battle which pitted the Portuguese against groups of people who did not want them to be dominating Indian Ocean trade. And in this battle, 17 Portuguese ships, most of which were caravels, but not all of them, attacked and defeated more than 150 enemy ships. No Portuguese ships were sunk in this battle, not one. They wound up with like 30 people killed, and every single enemy ship was sunk. This was how dominant the Caravel was. It was faster than anything else out there. It was more heavily armed than anything out there. It could maneuver really well. The Caravel was really the dominant military weapon of the day. And using the Caravel as the backbone of their military strength, by the late 1520s, really mid-1520s, the Portuguese controlled most of East Africa. They had gone through and regularly raided and then defeated and put in place puppet rulers in a lot of these city-states. They controlled southern India. They extended their control all the way out to Indonesia, controlling Southeast Asian ports as well. The Caravel really was an invention that changed the world and put Portugal in a dominant position. All right, that's all that I've got for you today. I hope you learned a little bit about Indian Ocean trade, and I'll see you next time. Farewell.